Alan, it's great to have you here again and to see your smiley face on this podcast. Well, people won't be able to see your smiley face, but I can. So,
Uh, thank you.
but it's great to see you. And very nice to see you in Munich at the conference as well, just before Christmas. So,
That was lovely.
yeah, it was a very good conference. So you're obviously based in Toronto and and as a Canadian, you've been facing the brunt of or a lot of the tariffs, haven't you? And particularly because you advise in the motor industry. And I'm really interested to know sort of how you've been advising your clients and what you found from having to work in this sector. Because when the US tariffs hit the Canadian car manufacturing industry, what were the immediate changes that you saw, and why does this matter so much globally?
Right. Well, there aren't that much in terms of immediate impact of the tariffs, simply because 85% of parts production are exempt from tariff increases under the U.S. MCA or the Automotive Pact Agreement, North American wise, which comes up for renewal next year in 2026. But just to get a better understanding of this, auto manufacturing is all about volume. While labor is a component, substantially most of the cost is in fixed overhead and raw materials. When plant production drops due to a production transfer, it requires cost reduction with a greater impact on communities. Tariffs increase costs of import production. In Canada's case, there are two factors that allow Canada to compete in the marketplace: labor and cost and quality. So tariffs take away the advantage of immediate impact, sorry, advantage of cost, because all of a sudden your Canadian dollar, which was trading in the range of about 70 cents in comparison to the US dollar, the tariffs would make up that, take away that advantage. The other impact is boardroom planning long term. Globally, you'd have the same kinds of issues. Long term planning, is for US production, reduction and reducing Euro and Japanese investment locally. So what happens is future planning, and in automotive planning industry, planning is at least 5 to 6 years prior to actually putting out production. So with that in mind, and you're looking at new investment, where is that new investment going to go to? It's going to go to the US, which means plants are not going to be built or renovated in Germany or in Japan or in the UK. They're really going to take place, or in Canada, they're going to take place in the US. That's the impact.
But we know that the EV forecast, so electric vehicle forecast, collapsed from 17% to 8% in North America, and we know that. So,
Mm-hmm.
how much of Canada's car crisis is actually about tariffs as opposed to a broader electric vehicle slowdown in sales?
Right. Well, the immediate impact is in electric vehicles. That is going to have a short term impact in the sense of the slowdown in volumes. And with the slowdown in volumes, of course, the suppliers to the OEMs in the business are going to see reductions in volumes. And as I've said, reductions in volumes impact profitability immediately because of the large fixed overheads associated with production. As far as those production volumes, then people aren't buying EVs. A lot of the alternate types of vehicles, the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engine type vehicles, or the HEVs, which are basically the hybrids,
Right.
uh, the production of those vehicles has to ramp up. With that ramp up, it takes time to ramp that up, and in the interim, you've got a drop in EV production without compensating for an increase in alternate productions because the investment in EV is so significant that OEMs can't essentially invest in EVs while investing in ICE vehicle improvements at the same time. It's just you've only got so much money, and your planning phase, as I've said, is 5 to 6 years out. You're not you're basically caught with your pants down in that type of situation. So you've got to essentially be able to shift investment and shift production. So the immediate impact is in EVs. Tariffs, as I've said, the tariff impact is going to be more effective coming in 2026 and thereafter from that perspective. But it does represent a dramatic change in the entire industry if, in fact, the USMCA agreement is revamped to the disadvantage of Mexico and Canada.
And really, Canada are taking a lot of hits at the moment, aren't they? So General Motors shutting plants, Stellantis is moving production to Illinois, Honda's delaying billions in investments. So
Right.
what's really driving these decisions to move out of Canada?
As I've said, these are boardroom decisions. So when you're talking about the concentration of the industry in Canada through grants and through loans, low cost loans in EV production, which is that 100 billion we've talked about. What happens is that doesn't take place or that gets shelved. And then what happens is it goes back into the boardroom of the OEMs and the tier one suppliers, and they say, well, we've got to look at our production going forward. We've got this tariff issue, and we have the EV issue now having a dramatic impact on our production in Canada. Are we really wise to continue investing in Canada given those types of circumstances, and given that, again, we've got a 5 6 year ramp up in decision making, tooling, and everything else that's associated with that? And as a result of that, the boardroom thinking might be, hey, we're politically better off by investing in the U.S. Given the Trump pressures currently. But the reality is, in the long term, whoever replaces Trump will be really not that different than Trump, because the momentum is now going America first. That's not going to change even if with a Democratic election or a president. It's simply going to be the same, perhaps not as dramatic, but the pressure will be on to do something similar to rebuild U.S. production, and it doesn't bode well in the circumstances.
Oh, I think you're probably right in that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've done some calculations, and I'm glad you did the maths and not me, because then
Yeah.
I can quote it. But you calculated that sort of year one tariffs are going to be about $41 billion, and that they would climb to about 52 billion by year three. I mean, this is not small amounts of money, but who's actually going to be paying that? Is it going to be the manufacturers or the consumers?
Right. Let me just clarify that's based on Standard and Poor automotive research, and also J.P. Morgan research that they've come up with those numbers. I can't claim to have actually produced those kinds of
Oh, I
numbers.
should just keep quiet. I'd have never known.
But
Just
the
thought you were really
reality,
clever, Alan.
yeah, the reality of it is that up to this point in time, the manufacturers have absorbed the cost of that. They haven't passed on the price increases to their supply base, but they will. In time, they will. It's really just they've decided in the short term to avoid the instability of passing on those costs either to their supply base or to the consumers. But over the course of time, they will not absorb these costs directly. They will put a lot of pressure on their supply base to reduce costs. And in addition to that, it will eventually, to some degree, be passed on to consumers.
I think that's ultimately right, isn't it? So the
Right.
USMCA trade agreement is going to be coming up for a renegotiation in July this year in 2026. Could you explain a little about the trade deal to start with, and then what's at stake for North American car manufacturing?
Certainly. The cross-border automotive supply business goes back to the 50s as far as Canada is concerned. There's been a long history. It was previously called the Automotive Pact, and has been in various forms a continuation over that period of time. It essentially integrated production between the US and Canada, given the close proximity of U.S. production plants, which originally were all about Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio in the U.S. Midwest, and Canada was, especially the Windsor and southwestern Ontario, was very close to it. So it was an integrated production process, which allowed the companies to essentially treat various plants as as subcomponents and components to a finished product. And it worked very well and continues to work well given the proximity. But a number of things have happened over the time that has actually decreased Canada's contribution to the industry, and that is number one, Mexico has come along the scene with significantly reduced costs as far as labor is concerned. And they've had their learning curve so that they produce a quality product in Mexico today, very quality product. And in addition to that, what's also happened is plant production has moved out of the Midwest US region to the US South as a result of, again, labor cost and cost of land and other components. So a lot of that production is now closer to Mexico than it is to Canada. As a result of that, there's been a reduction in automotive plants in Canada, but nevertheless, there's still overall wise, I think it's about 17% of overall North American production is still in Canada, and the demand is 10% North American wise for Canadian sales. So what happens is Canada is so far better off because it, while it produces 17% of vehicles, its demand is only for 10%. So it's got a 77% advantage, which is quite significant.
Mm-hmm.
When the USMCA, so USMCA or its predecessor, Free Trade Agreement, provides that all North American production, depending on the percentage, but generally, I believe it's about 85% of its North American production is exempt from any tariffs. It's duty free, so it can pass from Ontario to Michigan or Mexico to somewhere in Texas or Oklahoma or Georgia, duty free, which is significant. And what will happen in this year in 2026 is the prospect of a reduction in the exemption and increasing tariffs. That'll be pretty disastrous for Canada and for Mexico, in the sense that the cost structure will now change quite a bit. And if the cost structure changes, what are the US OEMs going to do? I mean, they're essentially going to say, well, we are better off by having production in the US. We don't pay a tariff. If we have to have it in Canada, it's going to cost us a tariff. That may change the industry dramatically. You can imagine they've got all of these, types of vehicles that people buy. And if we go back to we only produce what we sell, we're going to have one or two or three vehicles in Canada, as opposed to the significant choice that we have. And will that, and the other aspect of it is, the ability to attract additional investment from new players in the industry, such as the Chinese, to locate plants in Canada will be, there's not much of an incentive to do that when your cost structure is going to be significantly higher. You'd rather locate in the US.
Yeah, it's really quite depressing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just listening to you talk about it. It's
right.
quite overwhelming, actually, for people in the market. I'm right in thinking that in Canada, suppliers get reimbursed for tariff costs, but the car makers are just facing a compression of their margins. So, what does that mean for the supply chain?
Well, what it means in essence is, can you absorb the cost increases, and is that in your best interests? In the case of Mexico, if I were a U.S. Production manager in sitting in Michigan or in the suburbs of Detroit, I would say, well, I can afford the cost increases in Mexico because it's the labor so cheap at this point in time that I can continue production there. But in Canada, labor costs is significantly greater. Why would I want to do that other than for political reasons or for satisfying Canadian demand? What that does to the supply chain is that the OEMs, might encourage their suppliers, their large suppliers, who are already, by the way, significantly invested in the U.S. anyways, to locate more of their production in the U.S. And the Japanese likewise, the Nissans and Toyotas, they tend to basically surround their production facilities with their supplier production facilities as well, so that they will invite their Japanese suppliers or whomever European suppliers to locate nearby their assembly plants. So if their assembly plants are going to be invested in, they're going to be invested in the US, not Canada.
No, absolutely. You can see that. But Canada's invested $100 billion in EV infrastructure.
Right.
That's an incredible amount of money and just provision for this manufacturing. So how much of that is now at risk?
Well, a lot of it is at risk to the extent of its uh, not being able to achieve what's intended to. So, if the desire is to build battery plants as a component of the EV production, those battery plants will not be built. But battery plants will not be built, and there won't be employment, and there won't be community uh, support or community investment as a result of that. Those plants will not be built. In terms of actual out-of-pocket costs, I suspect that we're probably looking at about a third that's been spent to date of that. The rest of it hasn't reached the point where the money has been advanced, I don't believe. So it's about 30 some odd $1 million. That's probably 30 or 35 that has been expended to date on battery related production.
It's just really scary for Canada, isn't it? All of this. So
Yeah,
beyond the corporate announcements, what's happening to the workers? I mean, it always comes down to the workers, doesn't it?
right,
And you've
right.
got communities like Ingersoll, Brampton, and Oshawa. Did I say that right?
Yes, yes, you got it
Yeah,
right.
good. um, and usually with a manufacturing plant, the whole of that town or community rotates around the plant, don't they? And you have generational recruitment of staff and so on. So what's going to happen to them? How's that affected?
Very true, very true. Because as the OEMs or manufacturers tend to locate these plants in smaller communities for a number of reasons. Number one, cost. It's a lot easier to buy a large parcel of land in a rural community than it is in a large metropolitan city. Transportation within cities is difficult. Smaller communities have much easier transportation routes. So for these reasons, they locate in communities where there aren't a lot of alternatives. You have entire generations of families that work at an automotive facility, and that tends to be most of their workforce. And as a result of that, they've been working all their lives at either skilled or unskilled, usually unskilled type of processing at a plant. They don't know anything else. They're not likely to be able to find alternate jobs in the same industry. It's difficult. Some will relocate to other facilities. There'd be a negotiation between the OEM and the labor unions. But what happens is, it's very difficult to put new production in these facilities in the short term when they're relocating elsewhere. So, for example, in Brampton, facility just northwest of Toronto, that facility has now been closed for 2 years. It was supposed to be retooled for EV production. There's not going to be any EV production there. They were supposed to produce the new Chrysler Compass, or sorry, Jeep Compass. That's not going to be produced elsewhere. Where it's going to Belvidere in Illinois, and as a result of that, that plant has no immediate production availability. So that plant's closed 2 years. Those employees have essentially been compensated for 2 years, but not working. And the likelihood of being able to find another vehicle, given the long types of planning ranges we've talked about in the short term, will be very unlikely. It's not going to happen all that quickly. As a result of that, those employees are really not going to have an opportunity to work there. Ingersoll is not dissimilar as well. GM's not going to be able to quickly find another product to put in there. So what you've got is essentially vacant plants with no immediate solution to putting something else in there. And these people are not going to be able, they're going to have to retrain. If they're young enough, they can be retrained. If they're not that young, they'll have to face buyouts from the OEMs.
Yeah, it's really sad for those people, and they must be very worried and stressed
Mm-hmm.
about it at the moment. And the way that it's affecting people all over Canada, Canada seems very uniquely exposed to all these problems around this industry. So how has Canada got itself to a place where it was so vulnerable, and what could other countries learn from this?
Right. That's a question that would take probably about an hour to answer in a lot of detail. But in
Give
a
us the
short
top line
summary,
summary. Yeah.
right? It's in a short summary, it's gotten that way because the last 15 years, 20 years in Canada, there hasn't been a lot of investment in diversification to other export type markets because Canada is so reliant on the US as an export market. I think my last recollection, the last number is about 85% or thereabouts
Yeah, that's a
of
lot.
trade is with the US. It could be even higher. So I haven't been able to diversify. The oil and gas or mineral type resources have been bogged down in all kinds of impediments given the courts and given the politics to be able to provide new pipelines or to invest in minerals that are readily available. So that industry essentially has been hurt until fairly recently. But then, again, Canada to be able to export more to China and other countries in the Far East requires a further pipeline into BC and British Columbia. And the British Columbia government is very environmentally focused and not very accommodating to that
Yes.
type of process. What you have essentially is you haven't diversified in terms of exports to other countries. And part of that, of course, is the oil and gas industry. In addition, productivity in Canada has not kept pace with worldwide productivity. And you've had governments which have not focused on the right things in the last 15 years. As a result of that, Canada has fallen behind. And to the extent that it's invested in technology, that technology has not necessarily been kept in Canada, but been with startups bought out by US companies or bought out by European companies, which is another significant factor as well. So the lack of investment in technology has been a factor in that regard. And tax rates are significantly greater than other countries as well, which is a factor in what you see in the UK as well,
Yeah.
which doesn't attract industry when tax rates are so high.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah, the tax can be being a business owner myself, tax is something I'm
Right.
always interested in.
Right.
Yeah, so I totally understand that. Um, so there are in Canada today, if you were to give advice, having dealt with lots of businesses that are dealing with these issues in all sorts of different ways, what do you think are the two most critical actions you would advise to be taken now to help business?
By government, you mean?
Yeah, by government. Yeah.
I think they've got to reduce corporate tax rates and encourage investment by allowing for write-offs against taxes, making it more attractive for stock options and other types of incentives for startup type companies, be able to generate more funding available to startups to be able to invest in new technologies and to ensure that those new technologies stay in Canada. That's really the only thing that can be done now to reverse some of the poor decisions that have been made in the past.
And do
You know,
you,
we need, we need to
and
be more entrepreneurial. That's what Canada needs to be.
so with your knowledge of other countries doing the role that you do for the sort of global board for turnaround and restructuring and insolvency for Nexia, do you see other countries that may well say face similar issues, but perhaps with other industries, and have the same sort of risks? And what do you think that's going to mean for TRI in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think all of Europe is really in the same boat today. There's been far too little investment in new technology in Europe compared to the U.S. U.S. has really been the greatest focus of investment, either through private equity or through public companies. As a result of that, there's been a huge amount of money that's gone into new technology and AI in U.S. markets, in California, in Massachusetts, in the south of the U.S., Texas, etc., which has really boomed from a production perspective and created employment. The Canada and Europe are really behind from that regard. The entrepreneurial spirit that used to exist in UK, in France, in Germany is not there anymore. And as a result of that, you just don't have the competitive instinct that they perhaps have in the U.S., which is capitalism at its best or worst, depending on who you're talking to, and the still U.S. entrepreneurial spirit that's there. The rest of the world, but maybe not China, but the rest of the world is, maybe not India, but the rest of the world is kind of caught up in a complacency around uh, looking after their public and spending money on pensions and early retirements and much more of a socialistic type approach to to the world and to their people. And as a result of that, and I'm not saying that's a bad decision, but as a result of that, the entrepreneurial spirit is not there. It's a matter of what government can do for me, as opposed to how I can contribute to society. And that has to change if the European countries and eurozone are going to be stronger.
Alan, I could now go and have a sit down with you for about another 3 hours and discuss that last point completely. That's very interesting indeed. But unfortunately, we've run out of time, and it's been great to see you. And thank you so much for your input on this today. It's been really
Thank
interesting.
you. Pleasure.
Thank you.